vocal. I've never seen
right, good evening. Tonight is, you need a minute? You good? Tonight is Monday, July 11th, 2022 at 7 o'clock, and this is the Committee of the Whole for the City of Gehenna. The first item under our discussions tonight is an update from the Parks and Recreation Department. Director Farrell.
Thank you. Is this on?
Just flip the switch.
Would you rather sit?
So I'm Stephanie Farrell, Director of Parks and Recreation, and thought this was a fitting time to give an update. We are, believe it or not, halfway through the summer season. That's our summer season, of course. We'll hang on to summer a little longer here in Ohio. So I'm going to focus really on our seasonal operations. So you won't see anything from our senior center or our general recreation programming. I'll save that for another time. So we'll focus on our seasonal operations. Power. It's like a hair dryer. You gotta plug it in. So there we go. So some updates with our staffing. We have a new aquatic supervisor who started before the aquatic season. Chris Simmons came aboard. He was actually from the Gahanna Y branch, and we were able to recruit him over to our supervisor for aquatics. We also had a promotion of Annette Baxter. She was our recreation coordinator. She was promoted to a supervisor, did leave a vacant position with our coordinator, as well as an administrative assistant. Those are actually pending offers. We had some challenges getting those positions filled. There were multiple offers. Unfortunately, those were declined. A lot of variable different reasons, pay, schedules, those types of things. So those offers are pending, hopeful to get those in place quickly. We did backfill the horticulturist position with Miranda Gessner. She has started and is doing a phenomenal job with the arbor team. Also, Aurelio Dismuck, he is our general maintenance worker. This was a position that was open at the beginning of the year. We transitioned 2 part-time positions into a full-time position. That has been very successful with us. We've been able to maintain those staff members rather than a lot of the turnover with our part-time staff. And then also Chelsea Heppert, she started as our recreation coordinator too, focusing on special events. So rounding out a lot of new faces, a lot of transitioning and orientation to the department. Moving on to summer camp. So we are in week 6 of 9 weeks for our major camp. You'll see there are multitude. There are 3 camps that we program internally. So our staff are the ones who train staff and organize the program. The other 2 are by a third party. You'll notice that I have the age groups here, and then the number of weeks that the camps are available, and then the camp hours. On the far right, the spaces available, that's for the entire summer. One thing to note is that we do have an accreditation through the American Camp Association, and that does require a ratio of campers to counselors. We did have to reduce the total number of campers that we were able to program because of the total number of staff. We would typically like to see 25 to 30 counselors. We had 11. So we had to reduce those totals severely. With that, we also, with 11 counselors, that's if there's any vacation requests, if there's any time off, we're taking a lot of they're called recreation crew members, and those staff are able to be versatile with any type of program that we have. So those individuals work the paddle boats at Creekside, as well as special events. So we do cross-train those individuals in order to be able to maintain our ratios. For aquatics, I think I went out there. Okay. I know this is a really busy slide. This is an attendance from the beginning of the aquatic season to date. The 2019 number is a true reflection. We still saw some COVID effects from 2021, so I thought it was beneficial for you to see attendance from 19. And from left to right, we have memberships from GSP and Hunters Ridge. As a pool member, you do have the ability to go to either pool. We do track that participation there just to see who's coming where and how often. We also track our day passes. So we have new of 2021, a non-resident rate was included into the passes. So that's why you won't see that in 2019. That started in 2021. You'll also notice our memberships are starting to bounce back from 2020, 2021. Obviously, 2020, the pools were not open. That's why those numbers aren't being recorded. I'm going to go to the next one because I thought it was important to pull out the Gehenna swimming pool totals. You'll see that there has definitely been an incline of participation for this year specifically. There's a lot of people that we're seeing. We're over 3,000, and that's to date. So we still have quite a few weeks left to go. We have about 4 weeks left to the season. With that, we have, of course, our staffing. You're going to hear that a lot. We typically want to staff about 70 to 80 guards. We had 56 that were in the queue. However, 35 of those were able to go through a lifeguard class. So we host 4 lifeguard classes, and that way it's about a 40-hour session for the guards to be able to be certified. We, of course, have to have certified lifeguards. If they're not certified, then we, of course, can't have them in the stands. So we had 35 successfully go through the certification class. So our guards are, we don't have as many guards as we would like to see. Again, when you're talking about staffing the pools on a regular basis, as well as vacations, those types of things, we need to have as many guards as possible. And with these numbers that I'm saying, we have a high volume of people, and we have a lot of guards who are working a lot of hours. They've been doing a phenomenal job. We've had an influx of behavioral issues at the pools. We actually had the opportunity to have a SRO come out periodically just to have a presence there. It is not something that is only in Gehenna. We do communicate with our peer communities, and it's something that has been on the incline throughout the industry. So some communities have gone to variable different types of ways of managing it. Thankfully, our staff have been able to manage the situations of behavior, but again, that takes away from their ability to scan water. It also, unfortunately, takes their experience away. A lot of these staff members it's their first time. It's their first time having a job. We want this to be a positive experience for them. So it is something that we are definitely cognizant of and making sure that we're taking the proper approach to these situations. Golf, I hate to say it this way, but COVID was one of the best things that happened to golf. Golf is definitely on an incline. There's been great participation there. You'll see in April there was a dip, and that was ultimately because of the available days that the course was open. It was open for 18 days, and some of those days weren't a full day, so that's why you see a dip there. Outside of that, we are tracking very well, and we'll continue to. This past weekend, we had a record weekend for tee times at the course. So we'll continue on. Our golf course supervisor does a phenomenal job, Joe Hebdo, of making sure that the greens are phenomenal. We get a lot of positive feedback about how great the course looks on a regular basis, also understanding that it floods. So there's a possibility that it's flooded on Monday, you come on Thursday, you would never know. So they do a phenomenal job. Moving on to, we are in the process of our comprehensive parks master plan. We have We're on track to have a published plan to bring to council in October. So we are on track to continue that. What's been done thus far, demographics and trends. So the consultants, Pros Consultings, have pulled information from Gehenna specifically, also looking at trends of parks and recreation as an industry. So that has actually already been completed, and that will be incorporated into the finalized plan. Also, focus groups and interviews. I know some of you actually participated in some or both of those, so thank you so much for your participation. That is also going to be compiled. Later on, you'll see a survey. So some of you also may have received a hard copy survey in the mail to request some information and feedback of the Parks and Recreation Department specifically. That link for the virtual survey will be published by Wednesday of this week. So requesting a lot of information, a lot of participation with that survey, because again, that just helps us compile what the community is looking for as a whole in regards to Parks and Recreation. A site assessment, Pros Consultants actually came out and did a review, the first review. This will be one of 3. So they came out to multiple different parks and took an assessment of what is there, what some improvements could be done, and basically gave it a rating. They'll ask us to do that's something that we will do still to come. They'll ask us to do the same thing and then compare the ratings together. So of course, we've seen some improvements that we were able to see, but then having a third party evaluate the same things, it'll give us a lot of feedback that we need. And then a benchmark analysis. So we sent out information to 5 different other agencies for Parks and Recreation, and to compare what their agencies are doing to what the city of Gehenna is doing. So again, all good feedback. And this is comprehensive. So it's a 10-year capital improvement plan. This is an operational maintenance overview, staffing overview, recreational programming. So it's everything that we do will be all compiled. And this document, of course, will be used for the next 10 years or beyond. Some capital improvements that we have, and this is all thanks to the capital maintenance program funded by Issue $12. This is not an exhaustive list, but this is some things that we've been able to accomplish this year, either in the works or have been completed. One thing, and I note this regularly just because I know you all see the senior center sign. The sign, there will be 12 park signs that will be improved and completely that one will be taken down and a new one will be going up. So be very excited to see that happen. You also know the Headley Playground was completed. There was some drainage concerns, and we knew that the trail coming from the playground would need to be replaced. That has been done and has definitely improved that walkability there. Another thing worth noting, the splash pad had a portable restroom, and that was temporary. Ultimately, we were unfortunately waiting on some parts for the restroom that's outside of the pool facility. So we unfortunately are not immune to the demands of shipment issues. So that has been completed. It is done. So thankfully, there is a restroom that is at the splash pad that's available outside of the pool operation hours. It's of course much better than the porta potty that was there. So we're happy to see that open. That will also serve as a rest stop for the trail. As you know, the Big Walnut Trail goes right alongside the pool property. So if someone's using the trail, they're able to use the restroom facility as a rest stop. So that'll serve as a dual purpose. Well, we're on the splash pad. There's obviously been some feedback about the splash pad and the ability for it to be open outside of the pool season. So I just wanted to have the opportunity to talk about that, give a little bit of a history about how we came to this today, and explain some of the use that we've seen thus far. So the splash pad at the inception was to be an amenity of the pool facility. The Gehenna swimming pool was something that the city acquired. It's not something that the city had built. It's not uncommon for pool facilities to have a splash pad as part of the amenity. It's maybe not typical for it to come after the fact. We did have the opportunity, Pickerington community did build a splash pad after the original pool was open. So we did have coordination with the city of Pickerington as well as of how they manage their project and how they move forward. But ultimately, the splash pad created an opportunity for either young swimmers or non-swimmers, because if you've ever visited the Gehenna swimming pool, the lowest depth is 2 feet. So if for a toddler, for a again, as someone who's not very comfortable swimming, there's not a lot of options that you can do at that pool. There's not a baby pool. Zero depth entry is something that you see a lot in community pools. That's something that's not there. So the splash pad created that ability for those young swimmers to have something to play. I know I'm a mom. I have, an array of children. My 12-year-old might have a great time, but my 3-year-old, there's not a ton for them to do. So that's something that it was created a versatile option for families. So with that, we also understood through surveys direct to our membership, also surveys through our Parks Master Plan that was published in 2006, also an update in 2015, that there was the desire for improvements to the pools. So we took a look at what the infrastructure of the Gehenna swimming pool offered, and it provided an opportunity for the splash pad to be part of that pool facility. It also helped us, again, with our staffing situation. The Gehenna swimming pool closes once school goes back in session. So our staffing, of course, is predominantly students. So we only have the ability to staff one pool. With the Hunters Ridge being a smaller footprint, we have the ability to still offer the Hunters Ridge swimming pool once school goes back in session on the weekends. Typically, the Gehenna swimming pool would just close. At this point, the splash pad will remain open for the entire month of August through September, weather permitting, into October. So it definitely provides the ability for some additional water play. One other thing that we wanted to make sure, since it was part of the swimming pool, that we had the ability to do some of the fun features. We have a dump bucket that, if you're ever there, you'll see a little crowd of kids waiting for that dump bucket to go, or adults, depending on what time you go. So that it created the ability for us to have an interactive play feature. Oftentimes, if you see one in the community, they're groundwater or ground nozzles rather than those features. Because again, with lifespan of that equipment, we have the ability to monitor that as part of the swimming pool. I also we have, it's called Placer AI, and it shows us some data from visits. So the blue is from 2021, and red is 2022. So we just pulled some data from 8 till noon. Again, that's when the splash pad is open for free. And you'll, of course, see an incline of participation during those timeframes. So we do have the ability for individuals to utilize it in the morning hours. The next slide, you'll see, and this is what we were hoping for, Monday through Friday, you'll see that increase of participation. Again, we have more individuals coming to that facility during the weekdays because there's something for them to do there. So that's definitely something that we wanted to see and are happy that that's coming to fruition. That is the end of my slides. I'm happy to answer any questions or.
I have a question. The Toyota, how much money did they give for that splash pad? Because that just is an amazing thing.
Yes. So the Toyota Direct, they gave $70,000 for the shade features, which the shade features are not put up. Those are still shipment issues. We're hoping to see them at the end of July. But there will be 4 shade structures that, thanks to Toyota Direct, will be installed. there's not a ton of shade there, so if you're coming for the morning, for the afternoon, it'll definitely be a nice relief there.
Well, I think we should really be thanking them because
Absolutely.
that's a wonderful thing to have for our community.
Absolutely.
Any other questions? Yes, Mrs. McGregor.
When you have the statistics for the Gehenna swim pool, does that include, and maybe it did both years, the greater Columbus swim team, they practice in the morning? Does that include those kids?
That does not include that.
Okay.
So the numbers that are on that spreadsheet are purely membership as well as day passes.
Okay.
Any type of groups, we do have additional groups outside of that as well. That is not included in that number.
Okay, thanks.
I had a handful of questions, if that's okay.
Sure.
And I'll just kind of go through them in order. I received a question about camp ages potentially being reduced from prior years and that there weren't as many spots open for children going into kindergarten. And then also on the other end of that spectrum, there was some mention about the core program being eliminated. Could you speak a little bit about that restriction?
Sure. So the core program has actually evolved into what's called Level Up. So that was available for individuals 12 and over. So that did have an overlap. So 12 to 16, I think, was the age range. The reason it didn't run was participation. We have a minimum requirement in order to run a program. So it did not meet the minimum requirement in order for it to go. On the flip side of that, we do have our summer camp program is predominantly 6 to 12 years old. And a 5-year-old and a 6-year-old doesn't sound like a big jump, but if that student has not completed kindergarten or it hasn't been involved in that type of setting, it did create some challenges, really for the child's experience, but also for counselors as well, because they do have ratios of 1 to 8 with anybody 5 and under. So it decreases your ratios. It also could potentially, again, we want to make sure that experience is not only positive for that child, but also for the other children that are participating in camp. So the decision was to create little adventurers. So that incorporated the 5-year-old child into that age demographic so that it is only a half day. With that age group, sometimes a half day is enough for the child. It might be a new experience for an all-day setting. Our camps are outdoors. It is an outdoor setting. So we want to make sure again that it's appropriate for the age. We do have a third-party Jump Bunch does a program that you do have the option to do full day. But that's, of course, up to the family and if they feel like that's appropriate for their child.
Okay, thank you. Staff reductions, I did want to ask, you mentioned a little bit about staffing reductions for camping. Was that due to unfilled positions or unposted or budget constraints?
Unfilled positions. So we start recruiting in December. Their efforts were extensive, job fairs, postings. Our marketing communications team worked with us. Our human resource team worked very closely with us. And again, this is something that is, once again, industry-wide. We talked with our peers. It was not impressive. The opposite of impressive. It was staggering how many communities were dealing with similar issues as far as staffing. Some to the point that they either had to reduce, like we did, or cut programs completely. So it was, again, not something that's just here in Gehenna. So we actually just brought on 3 additional camp counselors this week. So the recruitment efforts continued on once the season started. The problem with that is the orientations that we have, the training that you have, we want to get that done and ultimately before May. March, April is ideal. Sometimes that's not the case. Again, we have students. So if students are away at school or if students are focused on their extracurriculars or their studies, then, once school is over, we have a big rush to get that orientation in and done. So there's a multitude of reasons why, but it was definitely not at the less effort to try to get those counselors in. We do have wait lists with our campers, so once we have staff members in place, we do have the ability to add more campers based off of how many counselors we have.
And I guess related to that, are you still hiring guards and camp counselors at this point?
Lifeguards are challenging because, again, we don't have any more classes offered. So we do previously offered 4 lifeguard classes. Just recently, there was an individual who was interested in lifeguarding. There was an open training in Delaware. That individual traveled to Delaware to get their certification, and then we were able to bring them on. So it's really based off of how often we have the classes available, and keeping in mind our staff, our leadership staff, are the ones who do the trainings. So that's 40 hours that's taken away from the pool operation in order to train new staff once the season starts. And when we have a reduced staffing already, that creates a challenge. So once the season starts, there's a large focus on the operation.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to keep going. The non-resident rates that you started in 2021, could you clarify if that's just for membership, or is that also for day pass rates?
That is for both membership and day pass rates.
Okay, thanks. All right, I think that was all the questions that I had. Does anybody else have any questions?
I have
Yes,
one,
Ms.
Penny.
Padova.
Apologies if you mentioned this, but did you say when the comprehensive parks master plan should be wrapped up?
October.
Okay.
So, and that's something that I will present back to you before it's actually published.
Great. I look forward to seeing that.
Anything else? Thank you so much, Director Farrell. I appreciate so much the work that you and your department are doing. My kiddo has been participating in Jump Bunch this year and has had a great time. So we're very happy that you guys are able to offer the courses that you are, and hopefully we'll get the word out to more people about staffing for next year.
I agree. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. The second item on our discussion is on animal control code. And I asked if Chief Spence, we've had some issues that have come up in front of a number of us, the administration and council, related to at-large dogs in particular. And so to kind of open up the conversation on this tonight, I wanted to ask Chief Spence if he would talk about the current state of animal control in Gehenna and give us some highlights and overview of how enforcement is going, what you're seeing, and just any other issues that you would like to discuss.
Okay, am I on? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay, thank you. So the current state of animal control, part of it is historical. The city at one point had a part-time employee that handled animal control issues. That transitioned at some point. I wasn't able to really find out when that occurred, but transitioned to a contracted employee. And then sometime in late 2000s, I think maybe as late as 2011, that contract was reduced as part of ongoing budget cuts. Since then, for the better part of a decade or more, animal control issues have fallen entirely to the sworn staff to manage. In Gehenna, they're generally complaint-based or call for service-based. Our response is within primarily Section 505 of the GCO. That's backed up with Section 955 of the Ohio Revised Code. Generally speaking, the current code as it exists provides us the tools for enforcement. These cases are extremely difficult to manage. They are very time-consuming. They are not simple in any means. We've had several long-standing cases. We also work with other community resources, Franklin County Animal Care and Control, and Columbus Humane, depending on the situation. There are, when it comes to animals in particular, they're viewed as property. We just can't seize them. Any control of an animal or taking of an animal has to be pursuant to the Ohio Revised Code. Search warrant provisions, Fourth Amendment protections, due process, all apply. Generally, we process these through mayor's court. At times, if the case warrants or potentially we're involving multiple agencies like Columbus Humane or Franklin County Animal Care and Control, we've done those cases at environmental court, Franklin County Municipal Court, the Environmental Division. At large, the interpretation of at large is very broad in our code. It's an effective enforcement mechanism. It provides us a lot of flexibility in enforcement. It's a minor misdemeanor on a first offense. Subsequent offense is a misdemeanor of the second degree. We also have codified in our in local code dangerous and vicious language under 505.14. We also have nuisance conditions that are prohibited. I think that's 505.05. Let me check that to make sure. I'm sorry, 505.09 are the nuisance conditions. Registration is also in GCO, also the immunization required or rabies vaccine. Those are required as well. And again, that's also backed up in Section 955 of the Ohio Revised Code. That being said, biggest problems at large. If you get on our Facebook page, you see the various dog posts of dogs wanted in their travails through the city of Gehenna. Generally speaking, those are one time. We approach it with a little bit of humor because our main goal is to get those animals reunited. The longer the animal is in our care and control, the more resources it takes. We have to engage Franklin County. We've got to maintain temperature, make sure that animal has food and water while we await transport to the animal shelter from Franklin County Animal Care and Control. That takes time. It's in our best interest to reunite that animal as quickly as possible. Nothing more in dealing with these cases over the years. I can tell you, you mess with people's pets and you mess with people's children, it becomes a very adversarial encounter. These are very adversarial encounters, generally speaking, with those pet owners. No matter the amount of legislation, and I've said this multiple times, you are not going to legislate responsible pet ownership. People will continue to do what they do. We have some habitual situations that we've been dealing with. One in particular, this is the amount of enforcement activity, offense reports, citations that we've generated going back well over a year. This is not neglect, indifference, or other things that's been characterized that we're not taking this situation seriously. It is very frustrating for us to manage these types of cases. We've taken enforcement action. In most every one of these cases, it's a misdemeanor of the second degree. It is not a minor misdemeanor. Please keep in mind, a violation of any one of these codes is not an arrestable offense without a warrant, even if it's committed in our presence. The Ohio Revised Code does not permit us to make an arrest without a warrant. Also, please keep in mind, in Franklin County, the way our bond schedule works, there's a presumption in most misdemeanor cases of recog in almost every case when it comes to a misdemeanor offense. There are certain exceptions that do apply to that bond schedule in Franklin County. They're far and few between. We can ask for special dispensation. We use that very sparingly, and usually there's some element of violence or potential violence. That's it in a nutshell. Just to give you a little bit of history, we really struggle in cases where there are not obvious signs of abuse or neglect. If an animal is impounded in Franklin County, and there are some very narrow abilities for us to impound an animal, the owner can come and claim that animal. One of the requirements, they are properly registered, they have a current rabies vaccination through Franklin County, that is verified. If the animal, and I'm not the expert to speak on this, but if the animal is 20% under a prescribed weight, I'm not sure how that prescribed weight is determined, but obviously there's a science behind it. The animal is not released. So they're not going to release an animal that has obvious signs of abuse and neglect back into an abusive environment. What we may consider abusive environments, there's a very high bar for that. I guess in closing, and obviously I'm sure there are a number of comments. I did go through the proposal, or I should say the summary of various leash laws and the like that was compiled for you. What I would tell you is some of these are not direct comparisons. For example, under the city of Pickerington, they have a lot lumped under 61801, which is animals running at large, nuisance, dangerous and vicious, dogs and hearings. Please keep in mind under 50514, we do have tether and leash requirements. We have a extensive permitting process that was updated in 2018. Our fines, or I should say our permit fees, were escalated. The insurance requirements were expanded under that previous council. So those aren't exactly like comparisons. Some of the other language that is in other municipalities is very vague and frankly favors the animal owner and that is at large, where our code is very broad and very amenable to citing someone for a violation, where these have a number of frankly, outs or abilities to obtain a dismissal if they were properly scrutinized by legal counsel. So with that, I'll turn it over to questions, I guess.
Thank you, Chief. We appreciate your work, and especially for what you've been, I know, in terms of enforcement on the one particular property that you're referencing tonight. Yeah,
Last comment. We certainly, and I don't want to take away, this does impact quality of life in the neighborhoods. We understand that, I'm not a dog owner. Frankly, sometimes dogs scare me. Please keep in mind, our officers are engaging with these animals. The last thing we want to have is one of our employees bitten. A good friend of mine was just bitten by his son's dog. It ended up being a trip to urgent care twice for antibiotics. Dog had all of his shots. It was an unfortunate incident. So we understand the quality of life in the neighborhoods. We understand the impact. We understand the fear, and we do take action when warranted. But again, whenever we're dealing with these chronic issues, it's taking sworn police officers that are tasked with a lot of things: crime reduction, traffic management, crash response, critical incident response into long-term habitual issues that are very hard for us to solve.
Thank you. Discussion. Mrs. McGregor.
Two things. I think the dogs are required to be on a leash if they're in a park.
Yes, that is correct. Yep.
And it seems to me that we changed, there's something about dogs and sporting events in the parks.
Yeah, the parks are a little bit different, and I remember a little bit of this discussion, but from a standpoint of a park is sort of, and I'm going to use the term quasi-private property, where we can place rules such as parks are closed after dark. It's public property, but not everybody can come into the swimming pool at midnight. So I mean, the reason that a lot of things can be codified that generally wouldn't be codified in the public space, even though it is a public park. So that is correct, that under park code, animals have to be leashed and controlled. We have a lot of sporting events. We have a lot of things. The parks, Academy Park, just over the weekend had a number of tournaments, and we had some parking issues up there because it was so, you think of that park as a giant parking lot, and it was so congested over this past weekend. So that's the reason that those things are in park code.
There was an issue with someone at a sporting event with a dog, and I don't remember, is it that the dogs cannot be on the sidelines if there's an activity, if there's a sporting, it was at McCorkle Park, and I thought we changed something so that if there was a sporting event, the dogs were not allowed on the sideline, but do you remember that, or maybe I'm misremembering?
I don't remember. We made some changes related to some service animals. That was a while back. I don't remember that specific.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
To be here. So there are ways, if there's a tournament or anything, that we can restrict for pets not to be there at all. And that is the case sometimes, especially if there's a high volume of people.
Okay.
The tournament itself can restrict for no pets.
Okay, that's probably what I remember. I knew it was, okay, thank you.
Sorry, I struggled with that.
Is that up to is that up to the tournament scheduler, to the league, or is that up to the city?
So we coordinate with it's typically our affiliate users, we coordinate with them. So typically, again, with that volume, it's understood that would be the case.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Are you, okay.
That's it.
Mr. Renner, did you want to?
Yeah, I do. Thank you. And Chief, thank you so much for your edification for all of us, understanding what this is. And I also want to thank the city attorney who helped me understand a little bit. In 505, and before I go further, I want to also thank our clerk, Jeremy, for putting together this summary just for public documentation. We do have constituents that are complaining about dogs, running, not just at large, and I know that that's a term it's in our code, but just not under control, and I think that's the key here. While there might be a slant towards a leash, in fact, I was, a leash law, and I was one of those that was probably in favor. But then when I took a harder look at our code, 505.01 in section B, where no person who is the owner of or keeper of any domestic animal shall permit that animal to be out of control at any time or place, even running in its own yard. And I think that right there is a de facto leash law. I think that, and if people, our constituents that have trouble, if they're walking and a dog comes chasing after them, and I think that's where I need help. What do we say to the residents of Gehenna? Do we just say, well, call the police? Or are we going to work on another solution? Because I understand your point that we have sworn officers that are tasked with a lot of jobs to do, and I don't want to live in a community that's a police state. So where is our balance, and what's our communication to residents about this if they feel threatened by a dog, even though they're just walking on the sidewalk?
Well, I think we've touched on this over the years. It kind of ebbs and flows as potentially chronic issues become known. You read the key to the enforcement action under 50501B is that that's a very broad brush approach to determining a violation. And all of these other codes, there are a number of caveats, there are a number of counters, there are a number of things that frankly make, in my estimation, those very difficult to enforce and achieve what we're trying to achieve. as I said very early on, we are never going to legislate responsible pet ownership. There are people out there that no law, and it's clear in all of this that no matter how many steps we take, no matter how many violations we write, no matter how many enforcement contacts we have, and each one of those has resulted in a separate charge, they're still not a responsible pet owner. So how do we, do I wish we get more calls for animal related? No, because that's an area that's an area of business I wish we were out of, frankly, because it takes us away from other things. How do we get the word out? I guess we can do more to educate the public in some of our various contacts. I don't want us to see, and you mentioned, policing. I don't want to over-police as well, because that becomes an issue. Very much so. I said people are very protective of their animals and of their equally their children, and can be as fiercely defensive of both, and sometimes more of their animals, frankly. So I don't know what the right answer is in terms of educating the public, adding things that are going to be difficult for us to enforce or result in some unintended consequence. When we're responding to these things appropriately, we are taking enforcement action. And frankly, we do follow-up with complainants. We had a meeting not too long ago with an impacted resident and explained all of the steps that were taken. Frankly, and I don't blame that particular resident. They had reached the end of their limit of frustration. But we still are constrained by the law. The defendant in that case has their due process rights. They have their rights before, in the judicial system that is, frankly, not our concern, or, I don't want to say not our concern, but we don't have any impact on that, how the court handles things. All we can do is file the appropriate charge, back it up with solid evidence in each one of these cases. And I point to this as just an example. This is by no means, there's body-worn video, there's in-car video, there are run records, there's various other records attached to these cases. In this particular instance, it's voluminous, and we're still not any closer to a resolution. And there's some things related to the property, and as it gets into where the animals are housed and our ability to impact from a property standpoint. Again, all of those things factor in. So I guess what I'm saying is it's not an easy answer.
Understood. Thank you.
Any other discussion on this item? Yes, Mr. Weaver.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chief, thank you. Thank you very much for walking us through, and Mr. Clerk for your research. I certainly hear you when you say that we cannot legislate responsible pet ownership. And I quoted you directly in my notes. I was like, oh, that's, yeah. In looking at some of the surrounding communities, was there language that you saw in any of those surrounding communities that you thought might be beneficial to our city, or is it grab bag, essentially?
I guess when it comes to legislation and putting a tool in a toolbox, I want the simple tool.
Yeah.
We've had other discussions in front of council on how to attack a specific problem through code or through some legislative solution. And it's not always an easy answer, because there's also unintended consequences of passing something or adding something. I looked at some of the research. Again, we do have tether requirements and a lot in nuisance code. Some of these, City of Pickerington and New Albany, they kind of jumbled everything into one section, so it was kind of hard to parse out. But, you know, I'm not an attorney, and I am not permitted to offer a unqualified legal opinion.
Very good.
Somebody drilled that into my head at one point. So there are at least 4 attorneys in the room.
There's more than that,
Be
trust
some more.
me. There's more than that.
I'm sure there are more in the gallery here, but there are 4 attorneys. You know, I look at some of the city of Dublin and some of these things where they talk about, they give an exception for direct control. I mean, if my client were cited in the city of Dublin for any one of these incidents that we could pick out of that have occurred in the city of Gehenna, and they were cited under this, I got a dismissal waiting. I could argue that case all day long, and I don't have to spend 4 years at law school to learn how to do it. That's failing 2 years and then 2 years of actual law school. You know, there's also a couple of sections of municipalities that say approach in a menacing fashion. Well, if this is after the fact, how am I supposed to, as the law enforcement officer, how am I supposed to determine in a menacing fashion? That may be in the mind of the person who is making the complaint, but how do I prove that when it comes to actually being in front of a judge or a jury? So a lot of these things throw a number of hurdles in my mind. I don't know what their success rate is in terms of how many times they issue citations under the code, how many successful prosecutions they've had, how many dismissals. But as Mr. Renner pointed out, in our code, no person who is the owner or keeper of any domestic animal, shall permit that animal to be out of control at any time or place, even running in its own yard. Very straightforward. So I certainly understand potentially where some of the other municipalities came up with the language, what they were trying to accomplish. But I think simple is better.
Thank you.
Chief, I just want to thank you for your time, and Mr. Clerk, thank you too for your time in compiling so we could compare some of these. You know, I guess I'll just echo, I think, some of the sentiment of Mr. Renner. I've had some conversations with Chief over the course of the year as off-leash dogs have caused me some concern in my neighborhood. And I think that, you know, we have sort of almost three different things that we're sort of talking about here. We've got enforcement issues with dogs that are not doing, you know, an owner that is really not doing the right thing with their dogs. We have code, which upon review and looking, and, you know, again, I am not the attorney for the city, but looking at what the code we have is compared to the code of other municipalities, you know, I can understand why we have stronger code language, frankly, than the other communities do. But then the third issue of this is really best practices. And I think what a lot of us kind of agree with is that it's best practices to walk your dog on leash. And that walking your dog off leash gives concern to passersby. I've gotten feedback from residents who are runners that they have dogs approach them. Those of us who have young children, I certainly had a very different view of dogs being walked off leash when I had a toddler in the park. That definitely, I've never had fear of dogs before, but that started, you know, that changed my perspective on it. So if there's a way for us to use this dialogue to encourage best practices and to encourage people to remember that that your dog might be a wonderful animal and a wonderful pet in your home, but that things that might happen out of your control while you're out in public with your animal and stimuli that you can't control. So I appreciate you entertaining this tonight. I know we have residents that are engaged on this subject. And I certainly don't expect this necessarily to be the end of the discussion, but hopefully this has been pretty thorough. With that, anything else on this topic?
Yeah, is best practices the same thing as just having respect for your neighbor?
Yeah, basically, yeah.
Just if I may add one comment on these cases, I just want to, the city attorney has reviewed our work. Obviously, if there's something that we can do better, if there's something that we can document better in terms of something from an evidentiary standpoint, I'm all about that. Whatever makes the agency's work product better is good. And the city attorney's reviewed what we've done, have and offered counsel on various things. But I think we are, frankly, doing the best we can. In some of these situations, I think I mentioned another one that was very difficult in obtaining a search warrant. That went on for well over a year and a half, and it was very difficult. But with that, these do take time. They take a lot of time.
Yes, Mr. Malarski?
I was looking at some of these laws, and most of them are identical or very similar to ours. Some of them mention having a leash, but it's all in the context of a dangerous, vicious dog under the same way that we do. The only one that I've seen that has anything like this is Bexley, and it says no owner, carver, keeper, etc. Of any dog shall permit it to go beyond the premises of the owner unless the dog's on a leash, cord, or tether. Okay, well, leash, cord, or tether, what's it got to be made out of? What if it's twine? How does that help? It's on a leash, cord, or tether, so now the person who wants to have their dog under control is going to have a little twine leash, that they're tether that they're going to put it on. Not more than 6 feet in length. Are the police going to stop and say, wait a second, that looks like it's 5 foot 11 inches, I want to measure that leash? Then it goes on to say, is controlled by a person of such age, size, and discretion. My former paralegal was 4'8". She weighed less than 100 pounds, and she had a 110-pound dog. Does that mean she's not allowed to walk her dog? Is an officer going to stop and say, hey, to me, you don't look like you are of suitable age, size, and discretion? Discretion? I'm not sure what that means, to walk this dog. So it just brings up more problems when you start trying to put these restrictions on, is all I want to say. And then it then goes on to talk about the menacing fashion. As you were saying, you have to be of age, size, or discretion to prevent the dog from approaching a person or other animal in a menacing fashion. So if another animal's coming at them, are they allowed to defend themselves? What constitutes menacing versus barking? One person's menacing is another person's, oh, come here, let me give you a tummy rub. So that's, you should tell I'm a dog owner. But there are just other problems that come along with this when you do try to become more detailed and more defined, I just say.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Malarski. All right. Do we feel the need at this point to have this on for committee again, or are we satisfied with tonight's discussion? Okay. All right. Thank you. Moving on to Section C, items from council office. Motion number MT-0014-2022, a motion to amend the rules of procedure of the council of the city of Gehenna, Section 6.30, hearing of visitors, establishing subsection 6.30A, in person, and 6.30B, via video. I will make this brief, and you are all welcome to weigh in if you want to, but we've talked about this quite a bit. So based on the city attorney's comments with regard to our last version of this proposed rule, Mr. Clerk, Mr. Van Meter, and I worked on creating some edits to this document. So it's the 0707-2022 version, or if you review the clean version. I did send this to Mr. Malarski earlier today. Mr. Malarski indicated that this did address the concerns that he had, not to speak to the policy concerns that he had, but that it did speak to I guess, legal concerns that you raised.
There is one thing which I got this after I